All right, I'm going to be talking about excretion today. So the first thing that I want to point out is that excretion is completely different than expelling undigested waste from the digestive system, because excretion is getting rid of metabolic waste versus digestive waste. So that's a big distinction that I want to make. So for some reason, we look at all waste as being equal, like urine and feces are both equally disgusting, but whereas neither of them, or I should say both of them, are waste products. Feces is filled with bacteria and actually very dirty, and it's from undigested waste, but urine is actually pretty sterile because it's just metabolic waste, just to make that distinction. So metabolism is used to describe all catabolic and anabolic reactions that happen in an organism. Now, catabolic and anabolic just mean breaking down molecules and putting them together. So wastes are a product of metabolism, and excretion is the process of removing those wastes from the body. So they're completely separate from digestion. Now, the process of digesting food is not a metabolic activity. Metabolism that's related to food happens in your liver, because again, metabolism is a chemical process, and digesting food is not part of metabolism because it doesn't actually lead to your body using energy. It's just the breakdown of food. The major waste products for metabolism are nitrogenous waste from catabolism of excess amino acids. Now, the nitrogenous wastes are poisonous and they must be removed by your kidneys. Your liver also breaks down hemoglobin to make bile pigments, and these are also excreted via the bile duct into the duodenum, which is that first part of the small intestine. So this is a rough sketch of the excretory system done by Gorn, who's from EP 10, 11, somewhere in there. And of course, because the kidneys are there to filter out metabolic waste, we also need water in order to dissolve those wastes. So all of this is controlled by the kidneys. Humans have two kidneys. You can see them here and here. Again, on the left side of the drawing will be the right kidney, the same as in all the other human anatomy that we've studied. When you're looking at a drawing, when you say right kidney, that's going to be on the left-hand side of the drawing, and the left kidney is on the right-hand side. They are bean-shaped, which is why the kidney beans are called kidney beans, because they look like kidneys. And like a lot of organs, relative to body size, we say that it's about the size of a clenched fist. Okay, I have no idea where my mouse is. I'll just exit. There it is. Okay. All right. So what else have I talked about? The heart, for sure. When we do the reproductive system, the uterus. I think there's a couple other, maybe one other thing that I've said. It's always about the size of a clenched fist, because your hand size is relative to your body size. So the larger your body is, the larger your hands would be. They are located in the small of your back. So if you feel your back right above your butt, where your spine kind of curves in a little bit, your kidney is on either side of your spine there. Their job is to regulate the chemical composition of the blood. This is why when your heart pumps, about 25% of the blood that leaves the heart goes straight to the kidneys. Just like everything else in your body, it is covered by a thin, tough, transparent membrane. This is called the renal capsule. So here you see a picture of a kidney that has been longitudinally cut. That means you're cutting through lengthwise. And you can see, sorry if you hear my cat, she's having a hissy fit for some reason. Inside of the kidney is called the cortex. sorry, further, no, wait. Yeah, the outermost portion, sorry. Oh, she's like completely like throwing me for a loop. All right, so right around the outside, we've got the renal capsule. You can't really see it here, obviously, because either they've removed it or it's just on top. Now, in medicine, medical terms, cortex is going to be the outer portion. So in the next chapter, when I start talking about, I think it's the nervous system. What is it? Yeah. And I talk about the cerebral cortex. It's going to be like the outer portion of the brain. So just in medical terms, cortex is like the outermost part. So this kind of grayish brown area you see on the outside, that's the cortex. And that makes up about 1/3 of the tissue mass of a kidney. Now, let me erase that. The inner part that you see here, this is called the medulla. And the medulla basically means like the inner portion. And that's the inner 2/3. And then you can see you've got kind of these sections here. And then they all dump into this area called the renal pelvis. And then you've got the ureter that leads to the outside, but I'll get to that. All right, so these pyramid type structures that you see in the middle, just going back to here so you can see them, what it looks like for real. These pyramid, or I don't know what you call those, not really cone, but whatever, these sections, that makes up the medulla. Okay, so you've got the cortex around the outside. You've got the renal capsule here on the outside, which is surrounding it, and then the medulla on the inside. Okay. Now, all of the renal medulla, it dumps into the renal pelvis, which is here. That's where basically the urine will be collected. I also want you to note the fact that you've got, because we're here to filter blood, remember? You got the renal artery that goes in, the blood gets filtered, and you've got the renal vein where the filtered blood will come out. And the renal pelvis will be where the urine is dumped, and that leads to the ureter. Now, each kidney has one ureter that leads to the urinary bladder. And of course, that's when that gets full and the walls of the urinary bladder are distended or stretched, we feel the need to pee. So that whole thing is the kidney complex. Now, the reason why we call it a kidney shape is because of the hilus, this like kind of concave area here. That is where the renal vein, the renal artery, and the top of the ureter enter and leave the kidney. So that whole area is called the hilus. And that's where, when you draw a kidney bean, you usually draw like a little like that. That's the hilus there. Now, for mammals, the main nitrogenous waste is urea, but this is not actually the, what do you call it? Like the result of the metabolism of amino acids. This is what the liver converts that into. So initially, when your body metabolizes proteins and it breaks down amino acids, the waste product is ammonia. Ammonia is very toxic to cells. So the ammonia is going to get transported to the liver. The liver is going to extract the ammonia from the blood and is going to convert it into urea. Then the urea is put back into the bloodstream, and then the kidneys take that out. But that's the main nitrogenous waste that's filtered from the kidneys is urea. Now, if you've ever gone into public toilets where they're not the cleanest things and they might have stale urine, and you walk in there and you have that really strong ammonia smell that like hits you in the face, that's because if you leave urine, like you don't flush it or whatever, then the urea will break down back into ammonia, and that's what you're smelling. The substances that are going to be removed by the kidneys are going to be toxins, urea, water, and mineral salts. Together, they're going to form an amber-colored liquid called urine. Now, inside the kidney, you have a million, I think about 1 million per kidney, of a structure called a nephron. Now, the nephron is going to be the functional unit of the kidney. What I mean by that is the function of the kidney is to filter the blood, and the structure that's actually inside the kidney that's going to actually do the filtering is a nephron. And so that's why we say it's the functional unit of the kidney, because of the function. That's a lot of functions. All right, so this is now a diagram of the nephron, and it looks a little bit sloppy, but well, it's okay. So there's going to be a lot of things happening here, but I want to point out there's three main parts, to a nephron. You've got the first part, which is called the proximal convoluted tubule. And I know that sounds super complicated. They're big words, but it actually is just like fancy medical speak for the twisted tube that's closest. You've got the loop of Henle here. This is where you concentrate the urine and selectively reabsorb more water. You've got the distal convoluted tubule, which again is fancy medical speak for the twisted tube that's far away. And then finally, you have the collecting duct, which leads to the ureter. So I'll go through all of those parts, and each of these parts is going to have a specific role to play in the formation of urine. Okay, so again, functional unit of the kidney is a nephron. This whole thing, by the way, is a nephron. Right, I was right. So each kidney has more than 1 million of these. All of these are going to dump, if I want to bring this back to the structure, the overall structure of the kidney. So if you look at this part here, the ureter, that's going to, sorry, not the ureter, the collecting duct, that's going to, come on, iPad. You're so slow, there we go. Let me get back to the kidney. That's going to dump out here. It's all going to dump here. So all your nephrons basically are going to like this, and then dip down here and then dump like that. So you've got your proximal convoluted tubule. Here's your loop of Henle. So I'm gonna let beam in. Okay, back here. Oh, my drawing's gone. All right, so if I've got my, like that, drop down, like that. All right, so you got the loop of Henle and then your collecting duct. So all of that dumps into the renal pelvis, which is here. Sorry, waiting for the slides to show up on my iPad so I know which one I'm on. Is that it? Nope, further than that. There you go. Okay. Right, so you can break it down to two basic parts. The 4 parts that I showed you before are like, I guess, sub parts of these. The first part is the cup-shaped structure that's here. This is where filtration takes place. And then the rest of it, which is this long winding tube that you see in this orange color, dips down, comes back up, and then twists around and then comes here. All of that is surrounded by capillaries, which you can see. You've got capillaries in red on this side, blue on that side, and then it comes back to the renal vein here. Now, the main filtration part, which I found this on Instagram last week, which I thought was kind of weird. Like, I don't know, I feel like Big Brother was watching, that they knew I needed a picture of an actual glomerulus. But here's this is the filtration unit of a nephron. This is called a glomerulus, and it's a bed of, oh, okay, my Bluetooth is going crazy. Sorry, my iPad keeps disconnecting, so. All right, so the blood is going to come in here under an intense amount of pressure. So this is a bed of capillaries called the glomerulus, right? And you can see that it's surrounded by a little thin white area. That's called the Bowman's capsule. So everything that's filtered out of the blood, you imagine like if you, oh, let's see. If you've got like a fire hose, but you put like a cheesecloth or like a filter over the fire hose, and then you turn the fire hose on, and so you like blast all of the water through the fire hose, but like the big things will be filtered out, right? Or will be kept in, but everything else is going to get filtered out. So the blood comes in through here under an intense amount of pressure. And so you have a lot of things that are going to be filtered out. Those things are going to go into the Bowman's capsule. Now, the things that get filtered out are the urea, minerals, water, even glucose, some things you want to keep, right? So you're going to have to reabsorb that. But it's like, I guess the most efficient way that nature has found kidneys to work so far is we're going to filter everything out of the blood, including the stuff that we want to keep, but then later on, we're going to go back and reabsorb the stuff that we do want and then keep the stuff that we don't want out. So this is where that happens. This is filtration. So huge amount of pressure coming in, squeeze it through those capillary beds, and then your filtrate is outside in the Bowman's capsule. So the glomerulus gets its blood from the renal artery. Again, if you go back up here, the renal artery feeds blood into the glomerulus here. All right, so I said that already. I'll try to find, I have a better diagram. Right, so here, oh, that's a better diagram, but I did want to mention why this being so slow. Again, you've got water, which you want to keep, urea, you don't want to keep, glucose and vitamins you want, salt, depends on, because you need salts to keep the concentration of your blood under homeostasis. But all of these things, good and bad, are filtered through the glomerulus, and then it goes into the Bowman's capsule. So that's why I like this diagram. You can see based on the red color here, that's the renal artery. So the blood gets fed into the glomerulus. So you see how it's nice and red here. This is the Bowman's capsule surrounding it. And then you see how it changes color here. That's because this blood has been ultra filtered. And now this blood is going to continue in the capillaries surrounding all of these tubules. Okay, that's a really bad connection. So the blood's going to continue to flow in these capillaries surrounding the tubules. So then you can reabsorb the things that you want and return it back to some veins here. And then the filtrate, which here you can see in yellow, obviously because urine is yellow, but it all gets filtered into the Bowman's capsule. And then this will continue down the renal tubules through the Loop of Henle and down like that. So about 20% of the fluid portion of your blood filters into the Bowman's capsule. The rest of it, like I said, which stays here and continues through the capillaries that surround the renal tubules. Right, from the renal artery going into the Bowman's capsule is something called the Afferent Arterial. And like I said, it's under a high amount of pressure. So why it's under a high amount of pressure, number one, like I said, it comes directly from the aorta. Remember, 25% of the blood that goes from the heart goes straight to the kidneys. So imagine all the pressure that it takes for the rest of the 75% of your blood goes to the liver, also to the heart itself, but also to the rest of the body, all the way around the body, and then back to your heart. The blood that goes to your kidneys straight from the aorta. Now, the afferent arterial is wider than the efferent arterial, which basically means it's like squeezing the end of a garden hose. If you ever have a garden hose, you turn the water on and you've got like a constant pressure, but if you squeeze the end and you make the diameter of the end of the hose smaller, then the water comes out at a higher pressure. And so that's exactly what happens here. Now, the liquid that enters the Bowman's capsule is now called filtrate. It is not urine yet because there are things in the filtrate that we want to reabsorb. Now, there's a lot going on here. So, because he did this on his own to like study for his exams later on. But you see how you've got part of the nephron that's here in the cortex, So he's labeled it here, but all of this, it dips down into the medulla. Okay. Here's another good diagram that distinguishes between the renal tubules and the capillary bed that surrounds them. So you've got the glomerulus in red. The Bowman's capsule is just that white area that surrounds it. And you can see all the renal tubules in blue. So the filtrate's going to pass through all of that as things get selectively reabsorbed. And then when they get reabsorbed, they will enter through these capillaries and be fed back into the veins. Right. After the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule, there's 3 parts to a nephron. And the twisting and turning of these tubules provides, again, a large surface area for material exchange. If the filtrate went from the Bowman's capsule straight to the ureters, to your urinary bladder, you would lose a ton of valuable substances. You would lose too much water, salt, minerals, and even nutrients that aren't absorbed by the cells or the liver yet. So that's why we have to have a large surface area to allow time for reabsorption. So this whole section, you've got, I remember before I said there's 2 basic parts. You've got the the glomerulus Bowman's capsule, and then the rest of it, which is the renal tubule. Okay. It's a long, twisty tube, obviously. If you followed this, you'd have to go around like that, and then kind of twist there. Loop of Henle is pretty clear. Twist around like that. Okay, and then finally at the end, again, surface area. So 3 parts to this. Again, proximal, convoluted, tubule. Proximal means near or close in reference to the filtration part of the nephron. Convoluted is just twisted, and tubule, small tube. If I ask you an open-ended question and you give me this really long explanation that kind of trails off in different tangents, I would say your answer is quite convoluted, right? It's really twisted. So that's this part here. Second part is called the Loop of Henle. And that's just this U shape here. The Loop of Henle is where we're going to use active transport to selectively reabsorb water and concentrate the urine. And the third part is called the distal, which means far, convoluted again, twisted, tubule, and that's here, the last part. So here we have ultrafiltration. After that, we're going to have selective reabsorption. The body needs to keep a lot of the substances that we squeezed out of the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. So as the filtrate flows through the renal tubule, these materials like the vitamins, the minerals, the salts, the water, they're going to be reabsorbed. Materials are returned to the blood by being selectively transported through the walls of the proximal convoluted tubule and entering the surrounding capillaries. And that's called reabsorption. So again, we've got, filtration here, and we've got reabsorption in the proximal convoluted tubule. So most of the reabsorption occurs right after filtration. 75% of the water in the filtrate is going to be returned to the blood. If there's one thing your body is really, really good at, it is conservation of water. Now, the minerals and any nutrients that have been filtered out of the blood, they're going to be returned by active transport. When this filtrate reaches the distal convoluted tubule, some substances pass from the blood into the filtrate, through a process called secretion. This is going to be any waste or toxic material that is left in the blood. The pH of your blood is also going to be adjusted by hydrogen ions, which will be secreted from the blood into the filtrate. Because remember, your entire body is built on, built on homeostasis. You need to make sure that all aspects of your body are stable, including the pH of your blood. So if your pH is too acidic, like for example, if you did some really seriously intense exercise and your muscles went into lactic acid fermentation, if you remember that from way back, feels like 10 years ago in grade 10, your muscle cells will go from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration. They will produce lactic acid, which is what makes your muscles sore. And so then your cells have to get rid of the lactic acid into the blood, and then that goes to your kidneys to get removed. So in between your muscle cells and the kidneys, the pH of your blood might decrease because of the presence of lactic acid. So then your kidneys will then secrete hydrogen ions from the blood into the filtrate of your urine to help bring the pH back. So here we've got the three processes that occur in the kidneys. We've got filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. And each of these colored arrows show where these processes occur. And unfortunately, the school is too keen for me to copy your books in color. But that's why I provide the PDFs on my website. So if you want to, you can fill in those colors. So the filtrate is going from the glomerulus, and you follow the green arrow. That's the path that the filtrate takes. Okay. Then you've got reabsorption occurs mainly in the proximal convoluted tubule, also between the distal convoluted tubule and a bit at the loop of Henle and at the very end. Most of this down here with the loop of Henle and the collecting duct is going to be water reabsorption. And you have secretion, which occurs in the loop of Henle. This is going to be salt, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And also any adjustment of pH or any more waste products that are still in the blood will be secreted from the blood. You see it coming from the capillaries here. Again, ions, amino acids, glucose, vitamins, minerals, anything that was filtered out of the blood are going to be actively transported into what's called the interstitial fluid, the fluid in between the cells. That will be reabsorbed by the blood. That is going to also create a difference in water potential. So this is going to result in water flowing out of the tubule into that space that follows it, because ions, amino acids, glucose, they're all solutes. If you increase the amount of solute, so let's just say, here's my tubule, and outside here, this area is the interstitial space. If I've got ions coming out, or maybe I not use blue because blue is for water. Got ions coming out, and I have amino acids coming out, and glucose coming out. These are all solutes, which means the content of water in my interstitial space is going to be reduced. That means that water is going to follow the ions, amino acids, and glucose from the renal tubule into that space between cells. So here's where the loop of Henle comes in. When it moves down the descending loop, water is going to move out of the filtrate by osmosis for the reasons that I just explained, because you've got ions. Remember, this is the, there we go, laser, because you've got reabsorption happening here. So you've got ions, minerals, glucose, whatever, that's being reabsorbed out of the proximal convoluted tubule. That means water is going to come with it. Okay, so the external concentration increases as you go toward the end of the loop of Henle. So as you go down here, the urine, which is, or I should say the filtrate, because it's not urine until it's over here. The filtrate in green becomes more concentrated as it goes down this loop because you're reabsorbing things out of the filtrate into the blood, which means this space out here is becoming more concentrated by solutes. That means water from the filtrate is going to leave and enter the space outside as well, which means that your filtrate is becoming more concentrated. You have less water here. The epithelial cells of the descending limb, that's this part, the descending limb, are impermeable to sodium and chloride ions. That means that sodium and chloride ions cannot leave going down. So the concentration of ions increases in the filtrate. So if you are actively transporting, just to be clear, here you are actively transporting solutes out of the filtrate back into the tissue surrounding the tubule. That means that the concentration of water out here is decreasing, which means as you go down the loop of Henle, water is going to move out by osmosis. That means inside the filtrate, your concentration is increasing as you go down because you have less water. It's in the space outside. However, on the ascending limb over here, you see how it gets thicker here? The ascending limb cells are permeable to sodium and chloride. So because the concentration of the filtrate is increasing as you go down, the concentration of the filtrate on this side is higher than this side. So sodium and chloride ions are going to move out. That's why you see the purple NaCl. These are in ion form, obviously, or not obviously, but because it's an aqueous environment. Sodium and chloride ions are going to move out of the filtrate. This makes the interstitial fluid, or the fluid around in the tissue, the cells surrounding the loop, hypertonic to the filtrate in the collecting duct. So as the filtrate moves down the collecting duct to the pelvis, more water is collected by osmosis. So what that means is, let me just go back here. You've got reabsorption occurring here, which means water moves out by osmosis. Because it's more concentrated on this side, and over here, the cells are permeable to sodium and chlorine move out, which means on this side, you have water moving out by osmosis. All of this combines to making urine as concentrated as possible so that you can reabsorb as much water as possible. So again, here you can see a cutout of one of these little, they call them pyramids, where the nephron, you've got the glomerulus up here, then you see the proximal convoluted tubule dipping down into the medulla. Here's a loop of Henle right at the end. So this is near where the pelvis is. Here's the pelvis. And then the ascending limb, distal convoluted tubule, and then finally the collecting duct here. Now, outside of the kidney, so you've got the renal pelvis. So all of your nephrons are dumping the urine from the collecting duct into the renal pelvis. That's connected to the ureter, one on each side. The two ureters lead from each kidney to the urinary bladder. This is what stores the urine. Now, when the bladder walls are distended, like your bladder becomes full and it stretches the walls, that sends a signal to the brain that says, I need to use the toilet. And muscular contractions will force the urine out through the urethra, which is the tube that leads from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body. Now, again, you've got, just like in your digestive system, you have a sphincter muscle at the base of your urinary bladder, which allows voluntary control. Now, this is something that is learned behavior, right? You got to potty train kids. You have to tell them to hold it. I'm not really sure how that translates because I don't remember being potty trained. I don't know if you guys remember being potty trained, but like how the kid's mind actually works as far as if the parents say you gotta, I don't know what your parents told you. And like I said, I don't remember mine, but if I normally just see parents being like, you gotta hold it, you gotta wait till you go to the potty. So I guess the phrase hold it just kind of teaches your brain to control that sphincter muscle. I'm not really sure how that works psychologically. Anywho,